Hey everyone, today on the BodCast I am talking with Kimberly Wilson. Kimberly Wilson is a psychologist who has written an extraordinary book called How to Build a Healthy Brain. This is the most thorough, complete book about the human brain and all the facets that contribute to its health and its wiring and its UNIS. So it's called How to Build a Healthy Brain, but this book is really about how to build a healthy you. It is such a well done book, and this is a fantastic interview. Kimberly is full of joy and light. She's contagious. She's going to set you on fire. I think you're really going to enjoy this show. Thanks so much for listening. Pull up a chair and buckle up. It's the Original Strength Podcast. Kimberly, you have many skills and talents. You're a psychologist, you're a really great author. I
Thank you.
think are you a chef or a very good cook?
I'm a home cook, but I have had my skills tested in the competitive realm.
I saw that. And did you, are you also a food producer for?
I was. So I had a luxury jam company for a little while, and we won a few awards. We have Great Taste Awards over here, and we rank very highly. But I had to put that aside to focus on other things.
No, I mean, I was impressed with all the many things that you do. And I think you also have a degree in nutrition as well.
Yes, master's
Wow.
degree.
And I'm a little bit late because I know you wrote your book, How to Build a Healthy Brain in 2020.
Mhm.
But if we're looking at COVID time, that just happened.
It
So,
just happened, and also it's not out in the US until November. So there are,
wow.
yeah,
Well, heck,
everything got delayed. So it's out, I think, first week of November.
well, then if you're in the US, you're in for a treat because this is a really great book.
Thank
And
you.
no, it is. I can't tell you how many books I read about brain health, but yours is the most whole, complete, and well-rounded from every angle. It's like you're so thorough.
Thank you. I do kind of take pride in writing like a comprehensive book because I wanted it to be essentially a Bible for brain health, that it had good information, and yes, research will change over the years, but the foundations are strong and that people can come back to, and they can dip into each different chapter. And I just wanted it to be relevant and accurate and helpful.
I think that's a great way to describe it as like a Bible for building mental health. And you do a fantastic job of using, like, you take science and show how what you're talking about, well, this is how it actually affects the brain. So this is really why you want to be paying attention to this or doing these things. So I thought it was just fantastic.
Thank you. Because I think one of the things I do feel quite strongly about sharing the science, because the alternative is to appeal to authority, to say, just listen to me because I know. But firstly, I don't like being talked to like that. I kind of like to have the information so that I can feel that I have a I'm making an informed choice. But also, it's about, I think, skilling people up. It's not just about saying, well, I'm authority, trust me, take my word for it. It's about skilling people up so that they can distinguish what's good science from bad science for themselves and see what applies for them, and then make the changes that they want to or can in their own lives.
Awesome. So reading your book and like just spying on you on your website,
Hmm.
you have you have is you call it whole body mental health.
Hmm.
How would you explain whole body mental health?
Okay. I call it that because I think it doesn't really make sense to think of mental health as separate from the body. So what I try to do is to consider what I do as a reintegration. At some point, around about 400 years ago, we separated our understanding of the mind from the body. It was, Descartes, I think, therefore I am, and my mind is a separate entity from me, from my physical body. That was the idea, that the human body was two separate constructs. One was material and one was kind of metaphysical. And so for Descartes, the mind and the soul were the same thing. He used the term synonymously, and he was making this case for a God-given soul. But the impact of that was that medicine, psychiatry, what became psychology said, oh, okay, well, the mind is a separate thing, and there is no contribution or no valuable contribution of the body to what's happening in the mind. And so that's how we've treated and looked at and considered mental health essentially since then. And it fundamentally doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even make basic sense, because if you think about the brain, first of all, is almost entirely encased in the skull. Only your eyes, which are technically part of your brain, have access to the outside world. So everything that happens in your brain has to come through the body. It doesn't have its own independent way of understanding the world. Everything, all the constructs, all of the experiences that come to the brain come through the body, which then means it matters what the condition of that body is. But then secondarily, and maybe even more fundamentally, is that your brain is made of nutrients, and it is made of certain nutrients that you can only get through the diet. You can't generate them, you can't synthesize them yourself. You have to get them from the diet. Your neurotransmitters, people talk about serotonin very casually. They are made from nutrients. Everything about the structure and function of your brain is about nutrients about diet. So therefore, again, how well you absorb your food, how well you digest, how well your enzymes are working in order to absorb nutrients from your food makes a difference to the building blocks that your brain has to function well.
That is, yes. And that's why I like your book, because it all makes sense. And you do talk about nutrition. You talk about something else too that a lot of people talk about, I don't know if you know this, but what is really popular right now is breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Breathing is very popular.
Yes.
In the health and fitness and wellness world. But how does breathing affect the brain? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So there are a couple of ways. The one that is best understood is really the relationship between breath and what you might call vagal tone, or just the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is our 10th cranial nerve. I think it's beautiful. So it comes out from the base of your skull, and it's called the wandering nerve. And it really does just wander all the way through your torso. So it loops in under the ears, goes down through the back of the throat. It breaks into two branches that go across into both of your lungs. It goes through the heart, the spleen, the liver, and then rounds up in the gut. So when we're talking about the gut-brain axis, in terms of structure, the vagus nerve is the main structural component of the gut-brain axis. But it's also, you might call it, the off switch for your stress response. So we have your fight and flight system, which is your sympathetic nervous system. And then you have the rest and digest system, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. And the main component of that is the vagus nerve. And the word stimulate is a little bit tricky, but I suppose we might say activate. I don't know, when we're activating this nerve, it releases acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, again, made from nutrients, which helps to reduce inflammation. So there are studies that are looking at, for people who have kind of treatment-resistant arthritis, vagus nerve stimulation helping to reduce inflammation and lower their pain. And again, for people who have treatment-resistant depression, there are some trials ongoing about using vagus nerve stimulation to improve depression. So, and the reason that the breath is important for that is, like I said, where it loops in through the back of the throat, the vagus nerve, when you constrict your throat, when you give a long exhalation. So if you do yoga, what we call the ujjayi breath, that kind of really hollow ocean sounding breath, in order to get that long extended exhale, you need to constrict your throat. And then if you're taking a proper deep belly breath, the vagus nerve innervates through the diaphragm. So you have these 2 points of contact or activation, the throat and the diaphragm. And so if you're doing breath work that especially focuses on a long, not necessarily deep, but a long, slow exhalation, then that is associated with this action of the vagus nerve and this reduction or this modulation of your stress response. The second way that breath is associated with the brain, and we're not sure what impact this has at the moment, but nasal breathing seems to regulate the wave of neural information. It seems to kind of coordinate the electrical signaling across the brain. I'm not sure whether we're exactly clear about what impact that has. There are some studies that indicate that it might improve memory, certainly in the short term, so that your recall is better when you learn something on a nasal inhalation than if you do it on a mouth inhalation. But lots of ongoing work in terms of whether that extends and how useful that is and whether it makes a difference to your daily life.
So long, slow exhales, but in and out through the nose.
Yes.
Don't be a mouth breather, basically, to improve your brain
Try to
health.
avoid that as much as possible.
So a question about the hollow ocean sound when you're exhaling. Do you also, because you can, do you also do it on the inhale too, or is it relaxed?
Yeah, you can do, I mean, it can sometimes take a bit of practice, and I think sometimes people can get a little bit self-conscious of it unless you're in a yoga studio or you're one-on-one with somebody. But when I'm suggesting it to someone as part of a treatment intervention, then yes, getting that practice of having that kind of deep ocean breath on the inhale as well is great. If you can
Awesome.
do it.
I was just curious because I started playing around with it when I was listening to you, but I was like, well, wait, I can do it both ways. So, like I said, you're very thorough, and you actually touch on something that I thought was like, wow, this is pretty neat. You were actually touching on being able to have crucial conversations. How can having a hard, tough conversation help the brain?
This is probably one of my favorites, and I think one of the kind of dark horse chapter of the book, because everybody wants to hear about nutrition and exercise and sleep, and people go, oh, dental health and all of that stuff. But the reason that I've put the emotion chapters and the difficult conversation chapters in is because over and above everything, what the research tells us is that in terms of longevity, mental well-being, satisfaction with life, what is most important is the quality of your relationships. It doesn't have to be dozens and dozens of people, but having someone that you can call at 3 a.m. if you have a leak in your roof or you need picking up because you're stranded somewhere, does huge benefit for your well-being. Essentially, because other people help to manage our stress response. We need other people to help manage our nervous systems. But when I did a poll a couple of years ago now on my social media, I asked, because it comes up a lot in therapy, basically therapy is about whether internally or externally, getting the person to the point of having what I call the big conversation. So whether it is telling a parent that you felt hurt by something they did to you in childhood, or telling a sibling that you find them intimidating or unsupportive, or apologizing to an ex that you feel like you didn't treat really well. There's a conversation that sits at the back of your mind, just ticking over, slowly and quietly undermining your well-being or undermining the quality of your relationship. Because if you're not having that conversation, there's a kind of shallowness and a synthetic quality that comes into the relationship, because I know I'm not really being honest with you. I'm not really being vulnerable and open and sharing with you exactly what my disappointment or pain is in this relationship. And if you don't do that, then you can't fix it. So the whole point of having the big conversation is, can we fix it? Can we address this issue? And can we take our relationship to an improved level of relational depth, where I feel closer to you and safer with you, and I can understand that we can disagree but fundamentally respect one another. And so after realizing that almost it was 90-something% of my audience have a conversation like this, I decided, okay, you guys, let me use my tips that I learned over a decade in working in with people one-on-one, and give you some examples and tips on how you can have this conversation. Because I want you to have better relationships. I want you to have stronger relationships. But I also want you, even, and I say this to my patients, sometimes having the big conversation isn't about changing the relationship. Maybe you've got someone in your life who's very difficult or stubborn or narcissistic, and they won't hear it. But there is huge power in being able to say to yourself, I've advocated for myself. I have taken my feelings seriously, and I have garnered the courage to stand up for myself. That in itself can be enormous for people.
It's free.
It
sets you free.
It really, and you surprise yourself. Hopefully you're surprised by the other person. I find very often that the other person is, they know something's wrong as well, and they're waiting for an opportunity, and both people are nervous about it. So even if people are kind of doubtful that it will make a difference, I always say, leave space for other people to surprise you. But just the shift that it can make for yourself and surprising yourself, and you can see the change in people's faces. They come back and they say, I said it, and I don't know what she thinks, but I feel really proud of myself. And often they're advocating for a younger version of themselves who's been kind of cowering inside, feeling very frightened. And it's almost like an act of reparenting, when you stand up for yourself and hold a line, hold a boundary, and also let other people know that you have needs that deserve to be recognized, if not met.
No, yes. And like I said, that really caught my attention, because I was like, and I think this is what sets your book apart from all the other books about brain health that I read, because you dive into some very interesting issues, but you back it all up with science, which is like, man, that science can be very cool, right? It doesn't have to be all gloom and doom, but you have another Trojan horse though. When you start along these same lines, because in the social media chapter, you go into actually challenging your beliefs and trying to learn new things to actually make your brain healthier.
So one of the things about social media is, and I think it happens a lot with any new technologies, that we can be quite alarmist. When televisions were introduced, it was like, oh, it's going to be the end of civilization. Maybe it has been the end of civilization, but
it's arguable.
The big question is, what is it doing to children's minds? Is always the issue of new technology. And so when we've seen this rise in mental illness in young people and psychological distress, it's, is it the fact that they're on their screens? And there's a kind of nuance around this, in as far as it seems to be the quality of your usage of the medium. It's not whether you're on your phone or not, it's what you're doing on your phone, and whether you're doing it with intention or whether you're just kind of mindlessly scrolling and you're getting sucked in, who's using who or what is using who. And what they found, a really lovely study found that in young girls, who are some of the most vulnerable in terms of social media use, in terms of high use in young women is associated with poorer body image and, lower body satisfaction and more anxiety and perhaps increased risk of self-harm. But what they found is, if you curate your feed and select aspirational, powerful, diverse women, actually it became a medium for good, and girls in particular had better mental health outcomes. But it is worth people understanding certain things about the role of technology. And I don't know if I put it in, I don't think I put it in the book, but there's an emerging database on what's called Technoference, which is the interference of technology in your relationships. And so, for example, if a parent takes their child to the playground and the child is off playing and the parent's on the phone, what is happening there? Well, actually, there's less attention, there's less interaction. But also, when we think about children developing their ability to explore the world, what they need is a safe base. They need this understanding that someone's watching over them, they can come back. And what children will often do is kind of just check back to see whether mum or dad or whoever is watching. And so there are questions, it's very early days in the research, but what is the impact of having this distraction? You'll see parents pushing babies in buggies and they're on the phones, and it's like, what is the quality of the relationship here, and what might the outcomes be kind of later on down the line?
So mental health is getting more, I don't know how to say this, of a look. It's more accepted, like people are becoming more comfortable with issues of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also still like a stigma about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
But in today's world, like with COVID and everything else that's going on in the world, there seems to be more need for awareness and resources for mental health.
Mm.
Where do you think, I guess this is a twofold question, where do you think we're missing it? And what do you think we're getting right about where we're going with mental health? This could be, I don't know if you can answer it. But...
No, it's a good question. The face I made was, I'm not sure we're getting very much right. So is my concern. So I think what we're missing is, I think a lot of the still, and you perhaps would have seen the research paper a couple of weeks ago that made a big splash that said the serotonin hypothesis is rubbish and it's in the bin, which we knew for a while. If you've stayed close to the evidence, you've known that for a while. But really what the serotonin hypothesis symbolizes is this idea that mental health is a problem that emerges only from the person. It is an internal failing of some kind, whether it's a chemical failing or a strength of will failing or a courage failing or a mindset failing. And mindset is a big one. This idea that you should just, through sheer will, be able to push through and be optimistic and blah, blah. So a lot of our thinking around mental health says it's about the person, and that's wrong, essentially. Mental health, psychology, as humans, psychology is an interaction. It's an interaction of individual characteristics and qualities in the person. So, for example, some children, there's a theory of orchids and dandelions. So your dandelion kids are the kids who were born laid back, your super chill babies who aren't really fussed by anything, who turn into toddlers who are just happy to kind of smile and say hi to everybody. Your dandelions, essentially, the idea is that they thrive anywhere. It doesn't really matter what conditions they're born into, they're doing okay. So it's an innate constitution thing. And then your orchids are your more sensitive children, and they are more sensitive from birth, and you can see that in their startle reflex, how much they shake when they hear a loud noise. They're more likely to be shy and quiet and what we would call reserved. What's interesting about the orchids is it's not simply the case that they do worse off. There's a really strong relationship and interaction for orchids and the environment. So an orchid child who is born, I guess, into the psychological equivalent of a concrete jungle, where, maybe parents aren't particularly emotional or empathetic, where we don't really hug very much. It's a stiff upper lip, as we would call it in the UK, pull yourself together, keep it in, toughen up, don't cry, this kind of thing. Orchids in those environments don't do very well. They do have poorer mental health outcomes. But orchids that are born into well-attuned, sensitive, thoughtful environments do very well, and sometimes they do better than the dandelion kids. So it's an interaction. Your mental health, your well-being, your psychology is an interaction between individual and maybe just, I was born with this kind of constitution, factors, and the environment. And the environment encompasses a lot of things. It involves the quality of your nutrition, which is building your brain, and that starts in utero. It involves the access to healthcare and green spaces that you might have in your environment. It involves the what socioeconomic level or class you were born into, which will have an impact on your life outcomes and the amount of stresses or difficulties that you will encounter in your daily life. So it's what we're missing in terms of our understanding of mental illness in general is this relationship between what is really the impact of the environment and how can we shift and improve the environment so that it's not just the dandelion kids that do well or the ones that get lucky, but it's more and more of the population that it has a better chance of being and staying well.
Awesome.
That was a super long answer.
Well, no, it was great because I just learned that I am an orchid, and it reminded me of how masterful you are at using analogies in your book to create the picture for what's going on. I think you're very skillful at that.
Thank you.
So, got just a few more questions.
Of course.
You're very joyful. So, what's your secret?
So I mean, I suppose it's probably, thank you, a few things, and one is I probably am a dandelion. I think I'm probably a dandelion, and I don't know whether I have cultivated it or whether it is part of me, but I tend to err towards optimism, and so I feel like it's horrible now, but this can't last forever. It'll be okay. I honestly, and I don't have like a control version of me that I can compare this to, but I honestly think that I have a brain healthy lifestyle, and that really helps. That I walk my talk. I try to eat well. I exercise regularly. I do the things that I say in the book, and I think what that does is just to give me the best opportunity for resilience, and also a sense of kind of steadiness, and I think one of the things that people find most unsettling is not just when things are bad or when they feel bad, but when it feels unpredictable. If you feel bad in an unpredictable way or you feel good in an unpredictable way, it's really disconcerting. And I think I have a kind of steadiness, and I really appreciate that. I do not take that for granted. I'm really grateful. Sometimes you feel like you don't realize how lucky you are to be well until you get a cold and you feel sick and you're like, oh my God, this is awful. Actually, I'm grateful every day that I'm well and my brain works well. I will literally little silly things, if I, sometimes you go into another room and you forget what you went in there for, and then you'll remember. But when I notice that actually my brain is doing really cool things, like holding on to something that I was meant to do, that I told myself to do a week ago, I will say, oh, thank you, brain. Well done. That's lovely. Like, I really appreciate that I have a brain that's working well. And I feel really, really, really lucky and grateful for that. And then I guess the final thing, so if this little basket of tools, is I do occasionally draw on existentialism, I guess, which is to say that I'm aware that my time on this earth is limited. I don't have any control over that. And so I try to hold on to even when things are rough, I try to hold on to the kind of the incredible unlikeliness of being. When you sit down and think about how wild it is that we're here and we're alive, the entirety of the universe and the expanse of time. And, I could have been born down a mine 100 years ago, but here I am, here in this moment in time, well and healthy. It just kind of blows my mind a little bit. And so I always, I think, have that to hold on to. Like, actually, it's kind of wild that you're here, and that's kind of cool.
So you actually do have the secret. That's awesome. You've got a really good spark. So if you were listening and taking notes, she practices what she preaches. She's grateful for everything. And she's just in awe that she's here right now where she is, and thankful for that as well. I think that's awesome.
I I think awe is the thing. I know it's very well, as I say, it's both difficult and easy, isn't it? It's difficult to not be subsumed by everything that is pushing down on us. And we need to take a lot of things seriously. There are a lot of things that we need to fight for and campaign for, and people that need protecting. And so there's a way that we need to hold that in tension. We talk about a dialectic, it's not either or. It's, can we hold this reality in tension with the fact that actually, when you're looking at the sky, you're looking at like light from hundreds of thousands of years ago. Like, that's crazy. That's kind of wild. And can we hold those two things in tension? Can you hold the reality with the awe? And I think the awe can be really stabilizing and nourishing.
And on that note, I can't top that. We can't, there's nothing else we can say. So the book is called How to Build a Healthy Brain. And if you want this book, it is a great book. And if it helps you catch on fire just a little bit, like Kimberly is, it is well worth it. One last question. Well, two. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they go to say they want to study you, read your wonderful articles, or maybe get some food ideas? Where could they go?
I hang out most of the time on my Instagram, which had been quiet because I've just finished writing my second book. So I've stayed offline for a little while, but I am back because I submitted my manuscript last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you very, very much. And I am Food and Psych on Instagrams, and that's where I will pop up with I suppose it's not random things that I've eaten, but I will post foods that generally sit within the the nutritious outline that I recommend, and try to give people meal ideas. Also talk about aspects of social life, and psychology and nutrition in psychology as well.
Awesome. I will put that in the notes of the show. I'll also put your website, kimberlywilson.co. And last question, creamy or crunchy peanut butter?
Crunchy. I need a little bit of texture. I need a little bit of something.
And that is the show. Kimberly, thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it.
Tim, thank you very much for having me. It's been lovely.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Now get outside and play.